The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
DCI Rewatch! On this episode, Leon May and friends discuss 1985 Garfield Cadets.
Jeremiah was so hard, they had to have counting practices. They had to sit the color guard down and then just learn how to count the show.
To me, this show is the culmination of everything about cadets that made me want to do cadets. And, made me drive 12 hours one way to camps to make it happen. This is where that all begins for me.
There are many great, beautiful pictures in this, but I think that a lot of the energy comes from the motion in between these pictures. And they really made the show about motion. I think one thing that sticks out when I watch it is they don't stand still a lot. Like, even when they'll get to arrivals, they'll keep cruising right through it. It looks like an arrival still, but they'll stop for a count or two and then boom, just keep going if they stop at all. There really was such an incredible motion in this drill, and it just kept you on the edge of your seat.
The Marching Roundtable presents DCI Rewatch. A group of friends watch one of their favorite shows, talk about why it's rewatchable, how it's held up over the years, the most rewatchable moment for each section, and how it might be different if produced today. If you'd like to talk about your favorite show, contact Tim at marchingroundtable.com. DCI Rewatch is sponsored by Fred J. Miller Incorporated, found at fjminc.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. This is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. I am so excited to talk about this. Is a show I love. We're talking about Garfield 85. What a show. The man of the hour, Leon May. Leon, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to talk about this show. Really my probably favorite of all time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, Leon, is that you're the main guy on this, and I said you can talk about any show you want to, and you were pretty quick with this show. And then you've gotten Jason Bentley along with us. Jason, how are you?
I'm good. Excited to be here. So
thank you for playing the role of Leon's friend who wants to talk drum corps today.
Got it. I'm good at it.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to be awesome. And who doesn't want to talk about this show, or really any drum corps show we love? That's the whole concept. Now, Leon, I have to start by saying you get huge credit because this was your idea. This whole podcast series, the rewatch thing, was your idea. We were sitting around at April camp down here in Florida, and you were like, hey, have you ever heard this podcast? And so do you want to talk about that at all or no?
Sure. Yeah. Bill Simmons has a podcast that I listen to pretty religiously every week. And actually, so does Jason. He's actually got a side project podcast that he does called The Rewatchables. And it is him and a couple other people. And those other people change every week. And they talk about movies that they love. And they talk about why they're rewatchable and why they're great and why what's aged well, what hasn't aged well. And it just seemed like a concept that could be taken to our activity, whether it be drum corps, winter guard, marching band. Yeah. I would think I would like to hear people that were fans of shows talk about those shows. And, we're going to see if it translates right here today.
Well, we're going to find out. But I think it's a great idea. And I so appreciated you sharing that with me and sharing that idea with me. And immediately I was like, wow, I like that. Because what's been interesting, Leon, is for the whole time of the podcast, I love talking about great shows that people love, shows I like. And I've tried all kinds of different formats for doing that. I've gotten people together that have created the shows. I've gotten people together to talk about different kinds of shows they like. But I think this is going to be, I hope, this is going to be something that people really enjoy. So Garfield 85. So just first off, why that? Wait. First, let me say why Jason. Why is Jason with us?
Exactly.
Well, Jason is a former student, and we are really good friends. And I know that he has a love for drum corps. We both marched in the cadets at different times, and I know that this would be a show that he really loves, and I know that it's a show I love. So when I called him earlier in this week to see if he was on board, he said yeah. And Jason and I spend some time together every month. When I go down to Texas, we hang out and we talk drum corps and marching band, and so we kind of already have that rapport of talking about the activity. So that's really why I thought Jason would be perfect for this.
That's great. So Jason, just in case people don't know who you are, just tell us a little bit about what you do in the world of marching.
Right now I write drill, taught drum corps for a bunch of years, all visual stuff. I want to get paid as little as possible. But yeah. So it's just that.
Awesome. So drill, so you're coming sort of from a visual place as you're sort of been, of course, Leon, of course, world famous drill rider now at Boston, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, people know who you are, of course. Well, I think this is going to be fun. I come from a music place and a visual place. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So now, Leon, why Garfield 85? Why was that like immediately jumped to your head?
Well, I'll contextualize this a little bit. The very first drum corps show I ever went to was Bloomington, Indiana, August 12th, 1985. And the cadets were at that show. So now August 12th, that would have been the last show before DCI.
Wow.
It was on a Monday. So that was my first time ever seeing drum corps live. I had watched some videos, but, and was kind of into it and gladly wanted to go watch this drum corps show. And the cadets blew me away. Just the fast music, the power. I remember seeing these two crazy guys with long dark hair, and they were barely wearing clothes, which I later found out was Mark Sylvester and George Zingali. But I remember seeing these crazy people like just acting nuts during the show as I would look over every once in a while and just see them cackling and just being obnoxious at the show, like out loud, just laughing at what was happening on the field because they thought it was so great.
Yeah.
And I was caught up in the moment as well. I can remember sitting there watching that in Bloomington, Indiana, just thinking, this is great. And honestly, I watched the PBS broadcast of that show, which is what we're talking about today. I watched it over and over. Like many people, they had the PBS Top 5 broadcast recorded on VHS, and they would just watch it all the time. When I was in middle school, I watched Little House on the Prairie after school. When I was in high school, I was watching Drum Corps every day. All of these great Top 5 shows: Blue Devils, Santa Clara, Garfield, Spirit of Atlanta, Cavaliers, Phantom Regiment. I've seen all of these shows so many times. This 85 show really sticks out to me, and I remember as the reason I wanted to be in drum corps, the reason I wanted to be a cadet, and a lot of like what made me want to be a designer and a drill writer, that, something could be this awesome out on the football field. So, this show does mean a lot to me. And it was the first one that came to mind of like, if there was a show that I'm a fan of that I had nothing to do with, this would be the one.
Yeah. Awesome. So Jason, what's your context for this show?
This is, Marching Cadets, especially when I did, it was like the mid-90s. Growing up, we found every VHS we could get our hands on, and this was one of them. And the thing that makes this show stick out to me the most, especially watching it when I had no context from drum corps, was that the Garfield Cadets looked like nothing else. There was nothing else like this show in the top 12 that I saw. At the ripe old age of like 15. But and then the other thing is just all the things that I loved about cadets, like elbows and stop and goes and stepping off on the right foot. Almost all of that stuff comes from this show specifically. So it's, it's one of those things that this is for the people that loved being there. This is where it all the identity formed, in my opinion.
Wow, amazing. I have to tell you, Leon, one of the greatest drum corps memories I have in my whole life was somehow I ended up sitting next to George Zingali at a show. He just came up in the audience and sat down. It was the first year of Star of Indiana. So that would have been what, 85? Yeah, same year. So I was at a drum corps show and with a friend, and he just came up and sat next to me to watch the corps. And then, you know how he is, as you're describing. He was so excited and animated. And I remember, like, I was like, there's George Zingali, and he's so excited, and he's like pointing out things during the show, like, look over there, and he's screaming and clapping, and it was just a great experience. So, that's amazing that we're getting to talk about this. The show, Jeremiah Symphony by Bernstein, of course, Make Our Garden Grow from Candide, and Overture to Candide. And,
amazing that it was a 3-tune show. A 13-minute 3-tune show.
Well, the opener's like 7 minutes long.
I think I got it clocked at about 6.5 or so, but
it's absolutely insane. It's like how do they do that without dying? Like, how, I mean, maybe we start there. Like, how do they get through this opener, as demanding as it was, as unbelievably hard as it was, mixed meters in the feet, unbelievably difficult music, and somehow they survive and they keep going with the show. Like,
yeah, I talked to a couple people that I knew were in this show, a couple that I happened to march with, and then some that are just now friends. And they all said that very same thing. Like, this show was so hard. It was so physically demanding that it really was just, the summer was a battle against this show to just try to do it justice, to complete it. And one of the things I got from somebody I talked to, Rick Wygant, who I'm sure we'll talk about later, he told me that Jeremiah in June, in the beginning of the year, was 8 minutes long. So, and the whole show was about 15 minutes. Like, they really had way too much material. And one of the things that, even if you like read Michael Boo's article on the Spotlight of the Week and some other things, like, that they did so many drill changes this summer, and a lot of it was to get the show, under time. But I'm sure a lot of it was, to make things, better in their mind too. But they had to make some serious cuts in the music. I know in Jeremiah they cut out the repeat of one big phrase, they said, and to get it down to the 6.5 minutes that it was. But yeah, to a person, all the people I talked to were like, this show was just so hard to march.
Well, and not only just physically, but like it struck me as being so mentally demanding. Like, how could you concentrate for 6.5 minutes where the forms are constantly morphing and the music was so demanding. Like, I just don't know how it's actually mentally possible to stay engaged at that level for that whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. It's like sprinting on a railroad track, trying to balance the whole time.
Yeah, interesting.
Like, I don't know how but this is insane. Because all those forms you're talking about, they're all reshapes. They're not even like straight path, even step size things that they're doing.
One of the things I got from listening to the 85 30th anniversary podcast that you did with, I think it was a lot of the design staff. One of the things Mark Sylvester said was, there were a lot of 1 to 48 count moves. Like, here's a pretty picture, here's another pretty picture. And then they spent the summer, putting 4, 6, 8 count subsets in between all of these pretty pictures. And, that was the kind of the evolution of the show during the season. I mean, it's one thing. There are many great, beautiful pictures in this, but I think that a lot of the energy comes from the motion in between these pictures. And they really made the show about motion. I think one thing that sticks out when I watch it is they don't stand still a lot. Like, even when they'll get to arrivals, they'll keep cruising right through it. It looks like an arrival still, but they'll stop for a count or two and then boom, just keep going if they stop at all.
Right.
There really was such an incredible motion in this drill, and it just kept you on the edge of your seat.
Well, and my reaction to that is, that's why I feel like when we get to the impact of the ballad and it stops, there's so much impact to that, because it's been this cacophony of this complex motion and constantly changing forms and never stopped in the music. And then we get to Make Your Garden Grow, and they get to the moment and they actually let them stand. And we're watching the garden in the back. We'll talk about those beautiful pieces of fabric. And like, that to me was hugely effective because of the planning of the way we arrived there.
Yeah.
I may be jumping ahead, but you're talking about all this energy.
The whole show, all the show up to that point was like an 8-minute setup for that ballad hit.
You could say that, really, because it made it so satisfying. And the fact that they stopped and the music sort of let you rest was just special. It made it even more wonderful to me.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll come up too when we talk about favorite brass moments. That release that happens at the end of that hit before the last mellophone solo comes in. I mean, it's just, I can get goosebumps just thinking about that. Yeah. Back to the difficulty. One of the things I talked to this a girl that I marched with actually a few years later that was a rookie this year. And she said that Jeremiah was so hard, they had to have counting practices. They had to sit the color guard down and then just learn how to count the show. And it's not even that it was, counting weird phrases, a 17 count phrase, then a 31 count phrase, then a 13 count phrase. That was there too. But there were a lot of tempo changes in that where they would change the time of their feet in a phrase of 13 counts. The last 3 beats would be in like 3/8, and they would slow their feet down. And all of that was made up on the go. This wasn't information that they got from a drill page. Because we would do that now. We would put the information on how the feet are supposed to go. They figured all that out kind of just to the music. And one of the things, and actually I remember Michael Cesario actually mentioned this. He was the program coordinator of this fine show. He mentioned it on your 30th anniversary podcast. He said banana papaya. And so Terry Kelly told me that was how they counted that part. Banana papaya. Banana papaya. I mean, they couldn't figure out the music at all. I mean, and that's how they kept time. Banana papaya. And that every time that happened, that's what they sang out on the field to keep time with the show.
That's fantastic. So all right. So I don't want to get off base, but the main thing I came away with was how is it possible they ever cleaned it? There are so many of these flexing forms and shapes, and a lot of the times there's straight lines on these ridiculous angles that come out of nowhere, and it's clean. How did they ever get this show clean, Leon? I don't know how they did it.
Mark Sylvester is a genius at cleaning, and at that point they were still kind of inventing how to clean an incredible drum corps and show like this. I think it's just total awareness. I mean, they really got those kids, and I will say something that I heard also that was a real veteran drum corps. I mean, there were a lot of kids that had marched 83, 84, 85, so they were going for the 3rd championship. So, they really did know how to use their eyes and knew what it meant to be in the form or out of the form, and how to flex shapes and understood how to reshape. But a lot of that comes from the instructional staff as well. I mean, how are they able to do it? I mean, they practiced a lot, I'm sure.
I mean, Jason, you're a drill guy. What is your thinking on this? It's so hard. It's so hard.
I think that, there's a will that, even survived well into the years, past this when I was in the drum corps. But they're just people that came there. We went there because we wanted the hardest, there was no challenge you couldn't just rise to.
Right.
You were just going to beat the show no matter what it took. But that stuff is crazy. And all that stuff, no grid, none of that. I doubt anybody's dots were whole numbers relative to anything. And it's just, that's the being able to use your eyes. I mean, it's I don't want to get into that dot guide binary conversation,
please,
because it's not. No one does just one or just the other, but this is heavy duty both, I would imagine.
So impressed. Okay, so do you want to start talking about favorite moments yet, Leon, or do you have something else first?
I thought maybe I could quickly contextualize this season. They started out with a 74 on June 8th. I mean, June 8th, that is an early date for a show, especially when your finals date is August 17th.
Yeah, but we started shows earlier back in the 80s.
I guess. I mean, even now we think June 15th or 16th is really early. But so they started out with a 74 on June 8th, and then really didn't see much of anybody until they saw that was in their competitive range, till they saw Madison in Atlanta around July 4th area, and they were a couple tenths ahead of Madison. They beat them at a couple shows there, and then again kind of went back to seeing no drum corps in their competitive range. Then they saw Madison again July 13th. They beat them, then actually got beat by them in Whitewater finals that year. So that was the first time that they had lost. Lost to Madison again the next week or the next day when they saw them on July 14th in Rockford. Then again, went on to 10, 15-point victories over, more East Coast corps. And then goes all the way to Wednesday, the 31st of July, to where they see Vanguard for the first time and lose to them by, at that point, a little over 2 points. And on that same day, Madison actually had a score higher than them at a different show. Then they leave Vanguard. They see Madison Scouts, beat them again. Then they see Vanguard, lose to them again. Then they get 2-pointed by Vanguard, and they're only 5/10 over the Blue Devils the next week on August 3rd. So we're getting down to crunch time. Then they're second to SCV again. They keep getting beat by SCV. Then they get beat by 1.5 points, and finally they tie Vanguard late in the season. Then they get beat by them again. Then they tie them again. They never beat Vanguard going all the way until semifinals. But they did tie them twice. All the way until of course, the show I said that I was at, Monday, August 12th. There was only them and Suncoast Sound, Star, Freelancers, 27th Lancers, Crossman, Argonauts at that show. And that was the last show before finals, 95.3. And then, the rest is history. They beat Vanguard by 0.2 in semifinals and then won by 1.2 in finals. But that whole season, Vanguard really thought that was their season.
And Vanguard was phenomenal in 1985.
Yeah.
What a show. Like you want to talk about another show that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember that show just being blown away. I mean, like changing the pants in the tunnel. I mean, that gag is priceless. It is. So
that was
awesome.
The whole Festive Overture change of pants thing. And that was like super amazing show. So this was still fledgling credit judging system too, right? Like the tick system was done 84, right? Or was this the year that they got rid of the tick? And
Tim might know that. I think it might have been 83, might have been the last year. I'm sure there's a drum corps expert that's going to.
It's somewhere right there. It's somewhere right there. Sorry. All right, so everybody, we're going to be talking about this show on the Marching Roundtable Facebook group page. So somebody weigh in and correct us on when that was. But you're right, Jason. Maybe are you thinking that made a difference? Being a new judging system, anytime you change it, who knows? I feel sorry for everybody in critique.
Well, I am looking
judges that got lambasted by either corps. Yeah.
I'm looking at the recap here, and this definitely is more modern. This is when there was brass general effect, percussion general effect, visual general effect, and then brass field and ensemble, percussion field and ensemble, visual field and ensemble. There was a color guard judge, but that score didn't count into the total. Something just looking at this recap that I thought was just great. The cadets got a perfect score in GE percussion, a perfect score in GE visual, a perfect score in ensemble visual. They were only 1/10 away from being perfect. They got a 9.9 in the subcaption, or in that caption for ensemble brass and percussion, and only 2/10 away in GE brass. So basically, all of the upstairs judges had them in first, and they had 3 perfect scores out of 6 judges, and the other 2 were 9.9s out of 10, and the other one was a 14.8 out of 15. So, I mean, upstairs, this drum corps really had, firsts across the board. Now, they ultimately were tied for first in overall brass, but were, didn't win brass on the field. So they didn't get the brass trophy. They didn't get the percussion trophy. They were third in percussion. Visual, they were third on the field visual. So, what really, made this show, and it's, hindsight's 2020, but, looking back, boy, this show just really did it all upstairs.
Well, and you know what? I mean, it would not be hard to theorize, just as I was talking about how hard I thought the show was, all these constantly changing and flexing forms. It would not surprise me if it was the kind of show that didn't actually get clean and work correctly until the very, very end,
Yeah.
I mean, there have been plenty of examples of that.
Right. They still got a lot of points. I mean, they got a 98.4. That's a lot of points.
That's a lot of points.
Especially Cadets history too. I mean, that drum, there are how many years in the 80s and 90s, was it just preview of champions roll around and be like fourth and then all of a sudden contending for a championship 2 weeks later.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned about putting in context, Leon. I think it is interesting looking at the cores in 83, 84, 85. They were groundbreaking in a different way each time. But if you sort of look at the three shows in order, you can sort of see how like 83 was really groundbreaking, super clean, 84 spectacular, in a different way because of the West Side Story stuff. But then it's sort of like they were like, okay, hold my beer. It's kind of like, where can we take this amazing track we're on? And, what's the most ridiculous, difficult thing we can imagine doing?
Right.
And sort of they do. So, all right. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about some favorite moments.
Okay.
Where do you want to start?
I think we can start, just the way you listed them out with, maybe, do you feel like we've already covered why it's rewatchable?
I think so. Do you have any more you want to say about that?
The thing that gets me is that I'm actually so anxious to hear the music. So I guess you could also say that, it's re-listenable. I love the music so much. Jeremiah is just so awesome to listen to, as is Candy to Make Your Garden Grow. But,
well, I think the rewatchable in our context is sort of, I'd like to see the show happen again. So like, in other words, like to watch the show again. So I don't think it's only talking about the visual, but it's astounding. What it was. I think we should start talking about visual moments.
Oh, sure.
Because I have to tell you, when I made notes, I have a lot of notes, but I have like a ton of visual moment notes. Because to me, there are so many brilliant visual moments. Did you guys have like one that's like your favorite? I had a hard time coming up with a favorite.
Yeah, me too. The one that I settled on was, it's silly, but I think it just wrapped up everything, and it's probably not going to be on anybody else's list. But it's after what you talked about, that giant hold. There's one drill move to get to the end, and it's you see the forms break, and you know where they're about to reconnect. And this is my favorite thing about Sully and Zingali is you see it coming a mile away, but it still comes out of nowhere and is like super refreshing and like resolves out of like that. That last drill move into the guard, like doing that contagion off to the sideline, is everything I love about what they do. Because people weren't really doing that like kind of guard transition back then. I don't know.
You're talking about the end of the ballad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. There's something incredibly satisfying about seeing these forms break, and you know where they're going to reconnect, and when they do, it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I love the hit set in the ballad was one thing that I wrote down. It's at 8 minutes, basically. That set is beautiful. That set could be in a show today. I mean, it is just fantastic. The way the three arcs of guard came off, the three arcs that were with the percussion and the brass. I actually drew it on my page here. I mean, that set is just beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous.
I wrote down a few favorite moments, but I mean, I gotta talk about the end of Jeremiah from about 6:10 to the end. The infinity arc that passes through and eats itself, and then they end in the two infinity arcs.
Yeah,
I think my friend Jeff Sactica would laugh at me. I've been trying to recreate that move my entire career. I've done different versions of it, a few times. I love it so much. It just had so much energy. It's getting something that travels and yet creates contrary motion within itself, and then finalizing with the pass through and then the resolve to the double infinity arc. I mean, to me, that was probably my favorite drill move of all time. So I gotta say it's probably my favorite drill moment in the show and the one that I like to rewatch the most.
It's happening in the battery and the guard too behind them.
Yes. Yeah. It's a double, kind of a double move. Kind of looks totally different with the garden battery, but it's, very,
and you have to point out that they're also like playing this ridiculously difficult stuff while they're doing this sort of blind backing around I don't know how they ever, I keep saying this. I don't know how they ever cleaned it. It's so satisfying. And it's sort of almost like it turns itself inside out. It's like you were to grab something and like unwind it and stretch it, and it's amazing. That I agree. I tried to replicate that with my sad little high school band. and it was, I mean, it was cool, but it was totally wrong because, but we all tried because we loved it so much. We all tried to do that.
Yeah, one of the ultimate like string of spaghetti moves. Like if you had a big piece of spaghetti and you try to kind of make that move happen, I mean, it was very much like that. And I do love that part so much.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that point.
There's definitely a couple spots like at 128, kind of in the beginning, and it's like from the video, because obviously you can see close-ups, there's some shots of cadets marching that are just like iconic. And I look at those and I'm like, boom, that right there, I want to be one of those. I mean, it really, really had that sense when I was watching that, like these people are amazing. Just such control when they moved, perfect spacing, perfect pulse. So there's a few shots in this video that are like, man, these people look great when they're moving on the field.
Yeah, like how did they find a whole corps of people who are all 8 feet tall? I mean, that's what they all look like.
Right.
Right. Just the uniform that the cadets had in the 80s looked so great on the field. It made them look so tall. The stripe on the pants, I just loved. I mean, it really... It's one of those things, like if your pulse as a corps isn't very good, it's going to make it look rough. But when your pulse is great as a group, it's going to make you look awesome. So, I really, shout out to the uniform because that really does look great.
Well, that uniform is all about the feet. It's all about the legs.
Sure.
Well, and they bought those jackets that year, and I think Leon and I both wore those jackets, like the same uniform jackets, all the way up until I think they got rid of them in '97.
Yeah, one little tidbit that I got from Mark McGahee, who marched in this drum corps. He's a band director down in Texas now. And we had a quick conversation about all this, and he said that they wore the satin corps jackets and the corps pants and painter's caps for the first month of the season through June because their uniforms weren't ready. So they did their first couple shows maybe in painter's caps, and
wow,
that was crazy. I know we did that one time when I was in the corps, and it was really because the weather had been so bad and the field was a mess. So we didn't wear the pants. We wore jeans and corps jackets. I remember once, but he let me in on that little tidbit.
Okay, so I have to tell you. I mean, I did write down like 7 different things, but I have to tell you, I think I'm going to have to go with the opening of the show. The chaos that builds over all this time into the block. Like that to me was so iconic of like how cerebral and experimental and brave and daring the corps was back. Like that was what they were. And the fact that they started in this like nothing. And then over all that time, and of course, there's a famous story of the guy flying out of the tunnel and making it.
Yeah, of course. He's somebody's name you learn.
Who is it?
Tom Smith was his name, and he came marching out of the tunnel, not running, not jazz running. No. He was marching as fast as he could from the tunnel to his opening spot. It was,
and the other thing I love about it is they suck into this block. And it stops, and they wait, and then they play the hit. And that's not even my favorite thing. And then my favorite thing is the guard doesn't do anything. The guard doesn't do any flag work. You know what I mean? Like they're just part of the block, and they just stand there.
Yep.
And they're just part of the form. So they're part of the chaos that forms the block. And then once that hit's over, and they step off from the block, then the flag appears. I think that's, to me, maybe the most genius thing of all. I love that they had that restraint and they knew it was about the form for that moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think THX stole the audio idea for their thing from that drill move, that whole thing. It's like the visual THX.
Yeah.
And let's shout out to the baritone solo at the beginning too. His name is Jim Cooper. I mean, and from what the people I talked to said, he nailed it every time he played it. And that is just such a beautiful sound. And you're right, the music and the free form. I mean, who was doing 20 seconds of free form in 1985? Nobody.
To start a show.
Right.
Yeah, right. To start the show.
Even more. It was so like completely new and fresh, and that it was so cadetsy. I can't even stand it. You know what I mean? Like it was just so cadetsy.
Yeah, I have a tough time figuring out between those two things, like what the best visual moment of the show is. But those are two great ones, that's for sure.
Okay, so I have a couple more written down. I imagine you guys do too. Jason, do you want to mention any others before I tell mine?
Well, we could go to the cello rondo of Candide right on the solo. That giant reshape, just rotation of that form, and I guarantee you that was George wrote one page and then he wrote another page and then Sully had to figure out the 90 counts or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's spectacular. Leon, do you have any other spots you wanted to mention? I have a couple more.
There's some beautiful pictures if people would want to check it out. The shape at 111, it kind of looks like I don't even know if you guys can see that. I know that our listeners can't, but that shape right there, it's kind of like
it's the animal cracker.
Yeah.
It does kind of like an animal cracker. Yeah.
I love that shape. It feels so modern. And then the shape at 245. Like there were some shapes in this show that were just second deck drum corps. I mean, like really like sets that you could see from the top of the stadium that encompassed the whole field. I really feel like drum corps for years before this, it wasn't about like that second deck picture, and this really got there for me. Like a lot of moments in this show, and at 245 is one of my favorite pictures.
Well, and right around that time, I want to mention. It's in the closer. It's in the closer.
Let's jump around.
No, it's okay. But I love this moment where, and I'll see if I can describe it. It's when they build the G, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the guard connects and there's this big, long connecting thing. And then the form over here on the bottom of side one at the corner swings around and forms the G. Cause there was always the G in these shows. And I just love that moment. It's so beautiful. And then of course, just the whole final, like 30 seconds where they're doing all this ridiculous stuff. And then they finally give you the Z pull and pull it out one last time. Like it's just also incredibly satisfying. It's just genius.
Which here it's actually an S. It's not a Z.
Well, it was this year's version of the Z pull, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
it's Leon on my mission to point out when it's not a Z pull.
Well, but S was for Sully, right? So, he had a lot to do with, molding and
the S pull, the S pull. Okay, all right. But still, they gave us that motion. They gave us that motion. All right, I have to be on my A game here. Leon's being very meticulous. I appreciate that, man. He is so prepared for this conversation. I'm so impressed. I do appreciate it. All right. So anything else about clearly the visual is just a knockout. Home runs left and right. Anything else we want to say about that before we go to another section?
Nope. I'm good.
All right. Let's talk horn line.
All right. Well, I have like 7 of these written down.
Okay.
I'm going to go through these real quick because I think a lot of them are honorable mention. The first impact that you've already talked about, when they come in with those chords, it is so bright in a good way and powerful. The sopranos there are just killing you. It's great.
Yeah.
The initial Jeremiah melody when it comes in, that is something that I just loved. I used to march around my living room trying to figure out how to do it. And of course I couldn't, but I would try. The tempo of the feet was so crazy.
Well, wait a minute. If you just listen to that, it's so beautifully articulated and performed.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just love that Jeremiah melody.
Oh yeah.
Another one I had was the banana papaya part. When those stabs come in, that is so ensembly difficult. to do on a field, and it seems like they nail that. I mean, it is so difficult to do.
Yeah.
There's another at 5:56. I have written down there's a little mellophone rip that is just tasty.
Yep.
It's so good.
Yep.
It happens right before they get cranking into the ending. The ballad hit set that rings, we already talked about. And then I have two more. One, the baritone part in the opener that comes in at 5:28, and it is just so loud and powerful. Ba-da-da-da-da. So me and my friends, we used to surprise each other and sneak up behind each other and sing this baritone part to each other. We love it so much. And just it was just so loud and powerful, and just it felt like you just knocked you back when you're in the stands. I mean, it is so powerful. And then my honor, that's to me, that's the best horn moment of the show. And my honorable mention really was the Candide trumpet solo. I mean, forget it. And I actually talked to Rick Wygant this morning, who played that solo. And a little quick note about that is he only started playing that solo like from the middle of the summer on. Like there was a drill change, they were taking out time, and boom, that solo was given over to him. Now, they thought he could handle it because he had actually played the solo in '84 as well. But so
wait, are you saying there wasn't a solo at all and they created it, or
no? Somebody else played the solo.
Okay.
Yeah, well, but in 1984 there was no solo, and they made a solo out of the Tonight solo, but that's a different podcast. But that solo, I mean, he plays the chromatic run up to a double G. He told me this morning, a double G. I mean, I could barely play a G above the staff, let alone a double G. And then the next part, the accelerando. I mean, they make him play that on the move.
Right. He's
playing that while he's marching, like this iconic accelerando. And one thing I also have to note, they called that part of the show the Fat Lady. You know, this is when the Fat Lady sings. You know, this is, you know, it's awesome. Not over till the Fat Lady sings. You know, that's what they called this part of the show, which I didn't know until I talked to him this morning. But, you know.
Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about this. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like I wrote down I thought all the soloists were wonderful. I thought the two soloists in the ballad were absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. They're also playing on the move.
I know. It's crazy.
Nobody stands still.
No.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate personally, but I mean,
tidbit about that ballad duet. Rick told me, because he also played that with the mellophone player Chris Lewis. But Rick said that was the first year that they ever experimented with, and in the ballad they marched toe first in that ballad that year. So he always his friends and people would make fun of him because it looks like he has bad marching technique when he's marching during that solo. But so he was trying to go toe first, and the steps were so small, it just looked like he was walking. You know what I mean? So like he's had to put up with people making fun of him. But the truth of the matter is like they were doing a toe first technique for everybody in that song, which in and of itself is, you know, probably a new thing, at least, you know, for that drum corps that year, as well as marching on the right foot.
Well, then I'm glad we were able to vindicate him today, all these years later. Yeah, right. Let everybody know.
Yeah, but just amazing. That the Candide trumpet solo or soprano solo is just amazing.
Yeah.
And the way it got the crowd going into that accelerando, just mind blowing. Loved it.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't mentioned Michael Klesch's name yet. This was his first drum corps arrangement, and at least the way I understand it, imagine that winning with your first show. I don't know where you go from there, Michael, but anyway, well, we've seen where he's gone from here.
He's done all right.
He's done okay.
30 years, incredible career.
Yeah, but I mean, like that is a stroke of genius to put that moment right there as we start the Fat Lady section. I like that. Jason, did you have any visual horn moments written down?
Yeah. But I have a few. I mean, I'm a mellophone player, so all the runs obviously are fun. The ones I gravitate to are the ones that are like the really massively spread, like towards the end of Jeremiah, right before the last mellophone rips. There are all these eighth notes that are just like slamming, and they're timed beautifully. Now the recording you can't hear it like old VHS. It sounds like all high brass. But I used to have this tape of 85 Garfield, their finals rehearsal, like just brass. And the low brass was just as on point as everybody else. So every time I hear that, I like go back to that audio. Derek Gibson borrowed that from me, and then he gave it to Harloff, and I think somehow Michael Klesch ended up with this recording of their finals rehearsals. And
well, I would love to hear it.
That.
All right, Michael, if you're listening, man, we want to hear this.
Yeah.
We find this thing, man. That is super cool. I have to tell you, I just think I'm going to say the ballad hit is my favorite thing. All right. I just think it's so absolutely beautiful, especially the way it ends right before the pause.
Yes. The chord structure there, the way those chords build into that moment is just fantastic. I love it too.
So
there's a lot of great horn moments in this show.
Yeah.
Well, and again, just so difficult. All right, so that makes me want to segue to the color guard, because that was also my favorite color guard moment. Should I just go ahead, or I don't want to jump in ahead of you, Leon?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm going to say that the guard, what the guard does in the ballad with those beautiful pieces of sort of lace fabric, whatever it was, and that was completely new to me at the time. Was that just using just one giant piece of fabric as what you performed with for the ballad? Was that new, like I think it is?
Back then,
I don't remember having seen that before. Yeah,
the only thing I ever saw, like even that top 12 video, I mean, a couple people had like stuff with streamers on it, like weapon equipment with streamers. I think was about as far as anybody was stretching anything.
I mean,
and then all of a sudden, here comes that.
I started watching drum corps in like 78 or whatever, and I don't remember. I remember that feeling like really new, but I just thought it was so beautiful the way they moved with it, the way it was choreographed. It was opening and the closing with the swells of the music, and then they would close themselves in it, and they would open up again. Like, I just thought that was so exquisitely written and performed. So whoever that was,
I kind of called those shawls. When I talked to Terry Kelly, who was in that color guard, she said they called them capes.
Okay.
But I think that, and I asked her, a lot of that stuff, the movement and the shawl stuff, the cape stuff, was a lot of Greg Cesario and Sadie Wallace.
Cool. Cool. Well, hats off to them. Stuff to them.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
One of my favorite guard moment is just one little 1 second count. It's 7:50 in Garden Grow, where they just flick their arms out, and it hits that little snare moment.
Yes.
Boom, right there.
Yes.
And they flick the shawl out, and it just opens up. It's just such a, so directly musical moment.
Yes.
And it just has a great impact because that, the white of those shawls just, explodes on the field. Yeah. That's,
I'm glad you brought that up. So musical.
That was my runner-up color guard moment.
Okay. Well, then what's your winning color guard moment?
In Jeremiah, the color guard gets pushed all the way over to side one, and the music it's one of the breaks in the music where then it's getting ready to come back in with bum 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 ba dum bum 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 ba da, and it starts building again. The color guard is like in an angular form like this, and they're just pushing across, doing work and spinning fast, and they do a big ensemble toss on the move that's great.
Yes.
That little section is like where I feel like they're really throwing down. I believe that Wanda Conway wrote all the equipment work in this show, and that part was just amazing. And of course, Peggy Twiggs, the color guard caption head or director at that point, cleaned every bit of the work. But I believe Wanda Conway wrote those parts, and it's just a fantastic part of the show.
Well, you talked about counting practice for the guard or whatever, but how could they? I mean, I keep saying this. How could they clean this work as exquisitely written as it was with this ridiculously complicated mixed meters and form changes, and they're marching all these difficult? I just don't know how. People, we talk about how great guard members are today and how talented, and that is completely true. But this is an amazing accomplishment of a whole sort of different type for these color guard girls. I don't think we should take anything away from what they accomplished because it's just phenomenal what they're doing.
Well, and at that moment, Leon's talking about they're on east, side one back of the field, so they're hearing the show counts after the audience hears it, and they're having to spin ahead of all that together.
Yeah, it's perfectly clean. And I have to tell you, after this show, I got to tell you, I'm still obsessed. How many years has it been?
35?
Don't say it.
Okay. Anyway, all these years later, I am still completely obsessed with arrows on flags. Like, I have loved it ever since 85. I can't tell you how many bands I've put a damn arrow on their flag because that all started here. Like, those Candide flags in the closer with those arrows, man. Like, am I the only one that's obsessed with these? Like, I just love those flags.
I like to throw a nod in there to the Garfield arrow every once in a while. I don't know, but not on a flag. I don't often program what the flags look like, but I could stick it in a drill move.
I mean, I think for that time, the silks they had that year did look great on the field.
Okay, so you're not in love with them like I am. It's okay. It's okay. Do you think they're dated?
No, I'm not going to say they're dated at all. That's just not what stuck out to me. That was great about the guard was the shape of the flag. But I like arrows on flags.
All right. Now he's being nice to make me feel good. All right. So anything else about the guard? One thing that Terry said when I talked to her, that this was the hardest show she did at the Cadets in 4 years, and the stepping off on the right foot thing just even made it more difficult. Like all of their phrases were weird numbers and counts, and nothing was consistent. Like we talked about, like they had to have the counting parties, but she just, imagine it's one thing for it to be difficult for the horn line, but for the color guard that's not playing the music and has never looked at a score in front of them or a piece of music with time signatures on it, I mean, they're just going with what they hear. And to try to get tempo to that had to be incredibly difficult, especially in 1985. Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, let's talk drumline.
Yes.
All right.
Leon, you want to go first? Jason, you want to go first? Favorite drumline moment?
Sure. There's a couple spots that are just purely because it's from the video. There's a shot at 3:05 of the snare line marching forward that is just badass. It is just awesome. The snare line is just coming at you towards it's about the 3/4 of the point of Jeremiah. And then it goes right into a shot of the quads that is just great. And the parts are so awesome with the music. So that part to me is probably my favorite drum part, but I can't go without saying that the Candide drum window is also great. It's so delicate. It's so musical. It's so Tom Hannum. I mean, Tom Hannum did a fantastic job with this drum book. I mean, he is great, obviously. Yeah. And then there's another spot. It's after 5:36 in Jeremiah. There's a shot of like the cymbal player in the pit getting a couple of gauges, and she does them all and she nails them and they're all in time. And then, I think she must know the camera's in front of her, but she smiles a little bit. It's kind of like the Blue Coats wink 30 years before, but you know what I mean? Like she smiles because she knows that she's on camera, but she also just nailed it. It's just an incredible, endearing moment, percussion wise.
That's awesome.
I have two. It's a tie for first place. And I'll include the pit here because nobody ever does. Well, no, you just did. Never mind. So everybody does on this podcast. But it's right before it's the Chiquita Papaya moment. Whatever. Right before that, there's this question answer mellophone saying the battery splits with that. The tenors are with the mellophones on the 10-yard line in the back hash. Yeah, the bass drums are on the back hash, 45 side 1. The snares are on the front hash, and they're all doing the question answer. And then after that, they play a phrase together coming into that straight line, one of the forms you drew, Leon. That spread is nuts. And it was clean, but even if it wasn't, it's still just trying it is nuts. And my other favorite percussion moment is that the kid on the concert bass drum gets his own camera angle with the boom, boom, they go through the head, so that all you see is his outline. Anytime you get your own camera angle, that's money.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I love the timpani player that they keep cutting to at the beginning of the show because he's sort of droll, about the whole thing. He's like just so on his job, Like,
it's probably hungry.
I love that too. And I just jotted down about halfway through the opener, halfway through Jeremiah, there's that drum, probably what you were describing, Leon, where the drums are down on side two, sort of near the front, and they just have this great little moment. It's just, again, real cadetsy, Tom Hannum doing his thing. So, all right. So, are we ready to start talking about this show if it was being done? Are we ready to move out of the descriptions? Or Leon, did you have anything else you wanted to say first?
No, I think I think we've gone through our favorite section moments for sure.
Okay. So now the interesting part of if this show was going to be produced in 2020.
We continue our discussion, including considering how this show might be different if produced today, after this short sponsor message.
This podcast is sponsored by FJM, Fred J. Miller Incorporated, found at fjminc.com. FJM is one of the leaders in uniforms for marching groups, drum lines, color guards, and concert dress and choirs. This includes the FJM Cesario collection. At the recent BOA finals, 9 out of the top 12 bands were performing in FJM uniforms, including the top 5 bands. FJM also provides all kinds of accessories for marching groups, as well as flags and guard equipment. Find out more at fjminc.com. That's fjminc.com. Fred J. Miller Incorporated, the company that changed everything.
Are we ready to start talking about this show if it was being done? Are we ready to move out of the descriptions? Or Leon, did you have anything else you wanted to say first?
No, I think I think we've gone through our favorite section moments for sure.
Okay. So now the interesting part of if this show was going to be produced in 2020, how would it be different?
I'll let you go first, Jason.
Okay, yeah, fine. Where it's I wrote this down. Where? No, did I write it down? Yeah, it did. Well, first of all, the obvious. I'll just get the obvious ones out of the way, and then let Leon handle the design stuff. Like, there'd probably be costumes. There'd have to be some visual through line that probably had nothing to do with Bernstein, because just having the same composer for 3 tunes. Well, just having 3 tunes. I think all of that stuff would be very different. Probably no headgear, a lot of costuming, and heavy duty guard integration physically as well as conceptually. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, I think there you could probably figure out some sort of narrative to tie to the show, or at least kind of give this a setting to this show. But the more general question of if this show were done today, well, unfortunately, we can't get the rights to do Bernstein music in drum corps. So really, you can't do this show today, which is, makes me sad. I would love to do the Jeremiah Symphony at some point in my career, but I'm really probably not going to get to. So, it's just too bad. And when I think of all the albums that I bought because of music that I heard, from First Circle to West Side Story, The Mass, all of this show. I bought all of that. I bought so much music in my life based on drum corps shows. So it's sad that the copyright for all this stuff is getting in the way. And Copeland's going that way too now. It's hard to do Copeland music in drum corps. How would it be done today? It probably wouldn't be, unfortunately.
No.
What do you say, Tim?
Well, that makes me really sad. So I think I need to have a little moment, collect myself. I also just don't know if, has anybody else ever done a 7-minute opening production like that? I just don't know if I've ever remembered that being done again. I certainly don't think anybody would do that in 2020.
The length of phrase, attention spans, no way. It's
so much development, so much time. I just don't know if I feel like that's the part to me that would be hardest to fathom.
Right. Well, finding 6.5 minutes of music from one piece that you can put connected to itself is hard enough to find. I mean, so Jeremiah was just an incredible piece of music to find. And of course, you know, I mean, like the beginning is actually part one of Jeremiah Symphony is prophecy. Part 2 is profanation. They really shortened the prophecy part from the original. And then a lot of profanation is kind of as is from the original kind of, you know, structure of it. But, yeah, I love that aspect of this show, though. I mean, I would love to be able to connect things. I mean, you know, Winter Guard more these days.
Right.
You know, you'll do kind of 7 minutes of the same feature,
right.
the same idea, and you know, obviously that's been made to work, you know, many times over.
Well, and the other thing I think that when I watch the show, I've mentioned this before already on this discussion, but I love how the ballad is so. It sits and it sort of settles and it's quiet and there's places where it stops. And the Guard is so simple with these big cape things, as they're calling them. I just love how simple that is. And I also wonder if in 2020, anybody would allow such a thing to be so simple and straightforward and not complicated.
I'm going to try to bite my tongue as much as I can on this.
Okay.
I told Leon I wasn't going to indict the whole activity when I came in here. If you did that, you would hear the phrase opportunity for development on probably every visual tape you got, even if it was an artistic choice to stand still.
And I'm not trying to like say anything bad about the state of the activity, but I'm just saying there's something I personally, as a longtime fan, I appreciate the fact that it's just simple and it settles and it's there and they're just these 3 arcs opening and closing. Like to me, there's just something so beautiful about that simplicity.
I agree. I love it. I wish, you know, it's just one of those. And again, I don't teach drum corps anymore, so you know, there'll be no reprisals on my end, you know, like, but it's.
Hey, well, listen, hate mail can come to tim@marchingroundtable.com. Not a problem. And like I said, we're having a discussion on our Facebook group page. So you guys let me know how ridiculous you think I am. You know what I'm saying? Like Leon, like I love the state of what Guards are doing, but I just don't see this being possible. Should it not be? Has this day gone? Has this day come?
Yeah. I mean, you know, the activity has evolved and many things have evolved. I mean, there are some things in this show that totally hold up and you know, one of the things that's advanced past what this show looks like is how Guards are staged.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of linear Guard stuff, you know, flag line at 4-step interval in a ambiguous kind of archy types of shape. And, you know, some of those looks, you know, you wouldn't do these days.
Right.
But still at the time, I think that this Guard was incredible. Now, the Guard wasn't a part of the total score back then, but I believe they were tied for 5th in Guard this season. I believe Spirit won Guard.
I believe that's probably
Spirit
right.
was in 6th place that year. But you know, so this, you know, certainly was not not thought to be at the time one of the top color guards, but you know, what they brought to the show musically, I thought was incredible.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, so then, Jason, you have something else to say? Sorry.
Well, just because like that moment you were talking, like the ballad moment for the color, I think that and into the end probably would translate the best of all the Guard moments to today's game because they have their own stage and the way they transition out of it. That's probably the most modern looking thing in the show for them.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. Okay, so if somebody was gonna produce this show in 2020, which corps would be most likely to do it? Let's just pretend we can get rights to the Bernstein and somebody's going to play it. I mean, I had one come to mind immediately.
Unified on this one.
I would be willing to see any drum corps do this. And past that, I'll abstain from the question.
Okay, so you're not going to get involved in this can of worms. Okay, well, I'll jump into the can of worms. Jason, do you have an opinion?
You know, I have opinions, but no, I don't know. I mean, I think probably the groups. Well, no one would do just 3 songs. I mean, Leon talked about that. I don't know. There's probably a handful. Like, you know, Phantom likes to do the symphonic stuff. You know, Crown has 2 of the 3 designers from this actual show. You know, and you know, Leon's always wanted to write it. Boston should do it. Well, I may not have leaked the 2020 show right now.
Shh, don't tell anybody. No, I got to tell you, I immediately thought Crown, just because it feels like, not just because those guys, Michael and those guys are there, but like it just feels like the kind of sort of cerebral classical stuff that they might do. That's what came to my mind. Mm-hmm. That's if I had to choose a core to do it, and that's just sort of the fun we're having with this random idea for this part of the podcast, I probably went with Crown. We know it's not going to happen. It's just sort of a fun exercise. So if you're listening to this, weigh in on our Facebook group page. I've said that too many times, but like, I'd like to know who they think who would they want to see do it? Interesting. It's an interesting thing to talk about, I think. And Leon is wisely staying out of this part of the conversation. So, all right. So I think we probably hit this pretty good. Are you ready for final thoughts, or is there any topic we didn't cover, Leon, before we go?
I think we pretty much went through it. I'm really happy with what we accomplished here.
And I have to tell you, I'm super impressed with your level of research. Like, I obviously have to up my game because, man, you did a lot of good research and looked things up, and I appreciate that because that really added to the discussion. So, Jason, final thoughts from you about this show or anything we've said?
The final thing's like the first thing I said. To me, this show is the culmination of everything about cadets that made me want to do cadets, and made me drive 12 hours one way to camps to make it happen. This is where that all begins for me. That's why I think it's one of my favorite rewatchable shows.
It's awesome, Leon. How do you want to wrap this up? Thoughts?
I ditto those remarks. I watched this show so much as a young person, before I even got really involved in the activity of drum corps, before I became a designer myself. I was in love with this show, and this I feel like this shaped me. It like I said, it made me want to be a cadet. It made me want to do drum corps. It made me want to be involved in drum corps as an adult. And I'm still playing this game to this day. So, I think what is also interesting about this show is when you look at the not really turmoil, but, as one of the people I talked to told me, like, the winter before this season is the real story. I mean, they had a different arranger. They had just lost their arranger and brass caption head from the year before. A lot of changes were going on in the organization and in the activity. I mean, they didn't even really have any music until March, when they decided to, change from the full first circle show that they were doing most of the winter. So, so many things that you can actually get from your podcast, the 30th anniversary podcast. Right. I suggest listening to that to really get a greater context for what happened in the winter before this season. But to me, this is just amazing, and I think it'll always be my favorite. It'll always hold a special place in my heart in the world of drum corps.
Yeah, I'll definitely put links to those podcasts where we talk to the staff about putting the show together. That'll be at marchingroundtable.com, where this podcast is located. Guys, this was such a fun discussion. It's so fun to talk about a show that you love and why and how it was put together and how it impacted you. I think this is really, really fun. So, Leon, thank you for doing this and dragging Jason along, or conscripting him, whatever it is. I thought it was really, really fun. You guys did a wonderful, wonderful job. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I had a good time.
Thanks.
Awesome.
If you'd like to talk about one of your favorite shows on DCI Rewatch, contact Tim at marchingroundtable.com. Just choose a show and a couple of friends to join you. It can be any show, any corps, any year. Just choose a show you weren't involved with in any way, and let us know what you think about this discussion. Do you agree with the opinions of our panel? Join the discussion on the Marching Roundtable Facebook group page. And don't miss WGI Rewatch podcasts, presented by the Marching Roundtable.
If you're a fan of the Marching Roundtable, please tell a friend or colleague about us. Consider writing a review on iTunes. Or better yet, become a member. For as little as $2 a month, you can get access to every podcast release and help us keep creating and sharing this great information. Go to marchingroundtable.com and click on Podcast Membership. Thanks again to the sponsor of this podcast, Fred J. Miller Incorporated, found at fjminc.com. This is your host, Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. Hear my marching band show arrangements at timhinton.com.
If you're a business that works with band directors, marching bands, color guards, or drum lines, you should sponsor podcasts at the Marching Roundtable. Our listeners are the exact audience you're trying to reach, and with thousands of podcast downloads each month, it's a great way to directly reach your target audience. For more information, click on the sponsorship opportunities link at marchingroundtable.com or email Tim at marchingroundtable.com. You can grow your business and help support what we're doing here on the podcast.